I proudly walked down the school corridor and imagined how I would spend my first lesson. Finally, I fulfilled my dream and became a teacher. And then I caught sight of the photo of the principal on the stand. Hell, it was Eric. When I was in high school, that asshole made my life a living hell. Eric and I were once best friends. I wanted to be a teacher, and he wanted to be a school principal. Everything was great up to one point. The best university in the country just announced an educational grant, but Eric and I agreed the strongest would win. But just before the competition, the whole school found out my main secret. I was adopted, and I only told Eric about it. My parents constantly reproached me that I was a stranger, and after Eric's act, everyone at school started teasing me an orphan. But something else became the last straw. In the final of the competition where I gave a speech, they threw garbage at me right on the stage and I was forced to run away. I had hated Eric ever since. I trusted him and he betrayed me. I was distracted from my thoughts by a familiar voice. Eric was waving at me from the other end of the school hallway. After everything that had happened, I was not even going to say hello to him. So I quickly slipped through the nearest door, and in a hurry, I hid under the first desk I saw. Eric was calling my name, and then he came into the classroom. His footsteps were getting closer. But suddenly the bell rang, and he left the classroom. Crouching, I crawled out from under the desk and suddenly noticed the surprised look of a teacher. She asked me menacingly what I was doing here. I tried to lie that I just dropped a pen, but she didn't believe me. Damn it. I didn't want to sound crazy on my first day, so I told her how their principal, Eric, had ruined my life. I was hoping for some support, but Nancy, that was the teacher's name, defended Eric. She said he was a great principal. They just adored him here at the school. My jaw dropped in surprise. Nancy continued. When Eric came here, the school's reputation was as bad as it could be. The previous principal was accused of corruption and kicked out of the school. And then this story was discussed in the press. But with the arrival of Eric, the school became one of the best. She was saying something else, but I wasn't listening. It seemed I had just come up with a plan for revenge. I would frame Eric, and I would make him leave school. This was the position he had dreamed of all his life. And I would destroy his dream, just as he destroyed mine. I spent a few days thinking about the plan and decided that I should give Eric a sedative and take a photo of us lying on the bed together. I would blackmail him with a fake pregnancy. To pull this off, I decided to throw a kind of welcome party for the school and invited everyone to my house, including Eric. Let's see what he says. Before the party, I bought a strong sedative and ordered a fake pregnancy test online. Great, now everything was ready. I was looking forward to the evening and now it was finally here. The teachers had fun. We danced, talked, but Eric was still not here. Damn, I did this for him. The holiday was already coming to an end when suddenly Principal Eric appeared on the threshold. I cheered up and greeted him nicely. Eric apologized for being late and suddenly pulled out a bouquet of my favorite lilies from behind his back. Did he still remember that these were my favorite flowers? While the guests poured each other drinks, I quietly went to the kitchen and poured the sedative into a glass. Then I carefully gave the glass to Eric and made sure he drank it all. Wow, in 10 minutes, he would be sleeping like a baby, and I needed to get him to the bedroom as soon as possible. Eric, let's go upstairs. We have so much to discuss. I sang sweetly. Of course, he agreed. We were almost to my room when Eric stumbled on the stairs and almost fell. Damn, I overdid the sedative. I dragged him upstairs with difficulty and quickly opened the door to the room. I couldn't let anyone see us. Eric couldn't think straight at all and plopped down on the bed. I lay down on his shoulder as if we were hugging and took a few photos. Done. And now, 2 weeks later, the moment of truth arrived. I went to Eric's office and threw a pregnancy test right in his face. See what you've done? He immediately jumped up and began to assure me that he did not understand what I was talking about. Then I showed him a picture of us in bed and defiantly burst into tears. Maybe it's a mistake, he asked excitedly, but I shook my head. Eric, the ultrasound also confirmed. I'm pregnant with your baby. I continued. Either you write your letter of resignation today and I won't tell anyone, or I'll go to the press and give them our photos and this test. As I expected, this coward immediately decided to write a letter of resignation. I was about to leave when Eric admitted that he didn't like working as a principal. And now he could take care of the family. What family? Then Eric gently took my hand and said, "Did you think I'd leave you alone with a baby?" I was taken aback. What happened to Eric, who was willing to do anything for his career? Eric said he'd drive me and keep an eye on me for as long as it took. But as soon as we were on my street, I saw the fireman. Eric pulled on and then I realized that it was my house on fire. Oh no, I was in such a hurry that I forgot to turn off the iron. I wanted to run to my house, but Eric grabbed my arm. He told me not to risk my life. Now I needed to calm down. We could go to him and sort everything out. I tried to collect my thoughts. I really didn't have any other options right now. An hour later, we were at his house. I was in a terrible state, and Eric brought me a blanket. My eyes were closing, and I didn't even notice that I fell asleep in the living room. The next morning, I got out of bed, but suddenly I realized that I was in a strange place. Where was I? Oh, right. This was Eric's house. I cautiously went downstairs and saw Eric cooking something in the kitchen. As soon as he saw me, he put the plates of omelette on the table and invited me to breakfast. He was trying to be good again. That pissed me off. I lied that I was in a hurry to go to the hospital, and I decided to look for a place to move to. I was not going to live with this traitor. I didn't have any friends in the new town, so the first thing I did was go to that teacher Nancy. But she refused me a place to live, and everyone else from the school did the same. I allegedly framed their favorite principal and all that. So by the end of the day, I had no choice but to go back to Eric. I quietly entered the apartment, but then Eric called out to me. Damn it. He scared me. He was sitting on the couch in front of the TV, and it turned out was waiting for me to come. Eric invited me to watch a movie. Remember, we went to the movies together, he said. I didn't want to, but Eric wouldn't give up. What if I told you I'd bought your favorite pistachio ice cream? He added. I hadn't eaten since this morning. So be it. I decided to join him. For a while, it was easy for me. Eric was always joking, and I couldn't help but laugh. But then Eric touched my stomach, and I snapped back to reality. Soon, my deception would be revealed. I needed to move out of here faster. I pleaded fatigue and went to bed. I wouldn't be here tomorrow. I waited until Eric had gone into the bedroom, then decided to run. Still, it was better to go back to my parents than to live with a traitor. With the last money, I paid for a taxi, but at the station, it turned out that the ticket offices did not work. Damn it. Then, in the middle of a dark street, I noticed a man. Who was it? Suddenly, he rushed in my direction. It was a homeless man. I ran as fast as I could, but he was chasing me. When he almost got me, the glare of the headlights blinded my eyes. I tripped and fell to the ground. Don't touch me. The car stopped abruptly and someone got out. Eric, he shooed the homeless man away and helped me up. I didn't think I'd be so happy to see him. Eric said that he saw that I was not in bed and was very scared. As we drove home, Eric suddenly said that he didn't think he'd ever told me about it, but he'd been in love with me at school. What? In love? It was like being doused with cold water. And why did you start a rumor that I was from an orphanage? Eric looked at me blankly and said he hadn't given away my secret. The information about the fact that I was from an orphanage was told by the principal of our school. When he was preparing the documents for the grant, Eric wanted to tell me about it in high school. But I didn't even try to listen to him. I couldn't believe my ears. So Eric didn't betray me? As soon as we got home, I said I had a terrible headache, and then I rushed to my room. I lay in bed all night, tormenting myself with thoughts of what a fool I had been to get back at Eric. I should admit that pregnancy was a fraud. But then he'd hate me. And then I had the idea that if I told him I'd had a miscarriage, then I wouldn't look like a stinker to him. I went to see Eric in the morning. I tried to stay calm. Eric, I need to tell you something. I had a miscarriage a few days ago. Eric was silent for a few minutes, and I could see how upset he was. I needed to distract him somehow. Come on, Eric, let's go for a walk. You'll feel better. As soon as we got in the car, Eric said that we were going to the hospital right away. After what happened, I needed a full examination. What? Not that. My lie was about to be revealed. As luck would have it, the hospital was very close to the house, and in a few minutes, we were there. Eric parked the car and we got out. Eric, I can't go to the hospital, but he came up to me and gave me a big hug. He said he understood how hard it was for me. I couldn't take it anymore. My legs felt weak. Eric said he'd bring the doctor here. No, Eric, don't. There was never a child. I wanted wanted to get back at you for betraying me at school. But I think I was terribly wrong about you. I was sure he would leave, but Eric just smiled calmly and said, even though you hurt me, my feelings for you are still the same. He took my hand and looked into my eyes. And then I realized, I don't want to leave anymore, Eric. I want to stay with you. A year had passed since that day. I returned to school and became the favorite teacher of all the children, but not for long. Soon, I went on maternity leave for real and became the kind of mother I had always dreamed of having. Did you like the video? Subscribe and like it. Support the channel. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Debbie. I'm 18 and I almost became my boss's sweetheart. Have you ever been paid attention to by a man who, well, shouldn't have done that? Your teacher or your boss? I was in that situation. But it was more complicated than you think. Watch this video to the end and you'll find out how I had to fight my boss's powerful wife for my promotion. I aimed at my future career since kindergarten and stubbornly walked towards the goal without looking around. In my graduating class, I won a competition from one well-known magazine in our state. No one was particularly surprised, including me. What was the reward, you might ask? Internship at this very magazine. Certainly not paid, but for an 18-year-old girl, it was already awesome news. Such a great start, I thought, and agreed. The boss, Mr. Stempson, or Fred as he immediately told me to address him, and it was already embarrassing if you understand me, turned out to be just a cool boss. I had been working in the magazine for about a month when near the coffee maker, I heard a secret from a colleague, Scott, that the boss needed a new editor and younger to work with the youngest target audience of our magazine. Some new and cool project was planned, and I started trying to hang around Fred, showing him what a valuable and diligent worker I was. You won't believe it. It worked out. What would you do in my shoes? Would you sit like a mouse and hope you'd be noticed? Fred allowed me to work on the project and, even cooler, promised me a new position instead of the boring rank of an intern. He began to talk to me more often, lingered at my desk, and I melted with joy because he was awesome both as the boss and the interlocutor. His good attitude towards me transferred into a personal invitation to the annual corporate, closed in an expensive restaurant. Yesterday's schoolgirl in my face just squealed with delight. Fred came to the party with his wife. I had never seen her before, and I would prefer not to see her again because at first glance, the tension between us thickened. I was a naive fool who thought only about her internship, and just in case, I decided to try to make Amy like me. That was the name of Fred's wife. But whatever I did, she only looked angrier and angrier. The next morning, Scotty and I went to the cafe and discussed the party and all the details. I told him about the incident with the boss's wife, and a colleague rushed to explain that the boss's wife was wildly jealous. Well, thank you. Very in time. I was now the main suspect in the case of seducing someone else's husband. I didn't have time to worry because on the same day my first big meeting was waiting for me. It was my ticket to the world of big journalism, although I didn't know about it yet. We were sitting around a huge desk in the boss's office and just chatting, offering a lot of fresh offers, and Fred couldn't help but brag about me. His secretary didn't have time to take notes. Near the end of the meeting, the boss shook my hand and in front of everyone told me that he would trust me to write my own weekly column. Beauty tips for teenagers and other stuff, but even this seemed like a huge breakthrough to me. The only thing that ruined my life was Amy. She worked for the same magazine, but it was the first meeting we both attended. She reminded me of a toad pouted with anger. And when Fred praised me and appointed me in charge of the column, I was even afraid that his spouse would now burst. As I walked to the workplace, Amy intercepted me near the smoking pod. She unceremoniously grabbed me by the elbow and forcefully dragged me into a smoke-filled but empty room. After the meeting, all smokers spent at least 10 minutes here. the boss's wife sat me on a chair and started asking me questions about my personal life. It was very unpleasant. I answered through my teeth and tried not to grudge, especially when Amy moved on to a topic that really interested her: my relationship with her husband. She tactfully hinted to me that there was no place for such an upstart and that I could lose my job. I ran out of the smoking pot as soon as I could. And I was scared, I confess. I was hoping this topic wouldn't come up again, but in vain. It just got worse. Fred arranged a team-building exercise for his staff in nature, a real team rafting on the river in boats. I had no experience, and the boss carefully insisted that I got into the same boat with him. He said he had a lot of experience and he would be able to keep me safe. If I knew we were going to swim with Amy, I'd be sick, honest word. This rafting turned into torture as soon as I felt on myself her eerie, icy look. Imagine being in the same boat with your worst enemy. How do you feel? It was not fun. Drowning then seemed like a worthy alternative. Fred and I boarded paired paddles on the sides, and Amy became the helmsman on the stern. We passed the rapids quite cheerfully, but on one of them, the boat shook so much that the water whipped inside and its flow pressed me against the board. And then the wave pulled me down and I dramatically changed my mind to drown, but I couldn't do anything. Fortunately, Fred's sturdy palm clung into my waist and the boss snarled me back into the leveled boat. The problems didn't end there. Amy turned white with anger, squeezed her paddle, the boat shook again, and with a loud splash, my boss's wife spit into the water. She was immediately pulled out, the boat was directed to shore, and Amy crouched on rocks to dry, but she was so angry that the air around her shook. She slapped poor Scott for not bringing her towels fast enough. The end of team building turned into a real test. We got to the end point of the rafting some way, but everything tumbled out of my hands under Amy's contemptuous gaze. Do you know how I hate gossip? Oh, and at work, it's inevitable. Very soon, we heard a rumor that the boss, for some personal service, was ready to make me, an inexperienced intern, an editor of a new project. When Scotty told me about it, adding that Amy was already aware and in a rage, I just freaked out. I felt the need to quit and spit on everything, but let Fred down who believed in me? I couldn't do that. Fred called me out to himself to talk about a new project, a new position, and all that. I tried to refuse. I was making a fool out of myself. I was afraid to even imagine Amy's reaction to my promotion, but the boss didn't give me a chance to speak out. He got excited, convincing me, saying something about young blood and fresh thoughts. He looked very flushed and his tie pulled up somewhere on his side, and when Fred started to correct it, he got hopelessly confused in a loop, and I had to rush to help him. When Amy entered the office without knocking, she wouldn't figure out why I stood so close to her husband and why I was holding his tie. She just started to yell. We tried to make excuses, showed the tie, but Amy's anger didn't know any measure and our words only infuriated her. After 24 hours, everybody was poking a finger in my back, giggling and gossiping. It was beginning to look like bullying, and I decided to quit. Now, finally, I was late with the resignation letter. The next meeting began, and the boss promised to listen to me later. The prospect of being in front of all those gossipers was not great, but I had no choice. I thought I was going to be the target for general hatred, but Fred praised me and the whole team so sincerely that I was even touched. But not everyone liked it, and someone started freely in front of Fred, mumbling that I got this promotion in a famous way. And when Fred was indignant and protected me, Amy came in, and she had a look. Everything's clear with you. Red with anger, she came up to me and spit out in my face that I was a brazen schoolgirl who was ready to ruin someone else's marriage for the sake of her career. Well, I responded by calling her a jealous tantrum and walked out of the office, slamming the door. Everything in me literally pulsed and burned from the anger. I felt like a living torch. I didn't even want to cry, so I freaked out. Scott found me, said Fred put his wife in place and that the position of editor was mine and leaving the magazine was unnecessary. But honestly, I never had any desire to stay here. I took a letter of recommendation from Fred and attached it to my college papers. I walked out the magazine's office with my head held high. I decided to dive into my studies with a head. And in 2 years, I plan to take a part-time job in another edition. It's not so solid, but it's not so scandalous. Did someone else's patronage backfire? Tell me about it in the comments. If you want to hear more news stories, be sure to subscribe to the channel and click the bell icon. Everyone for now, until new meetings.
That morning, I was woken up by a call from my dream company. The boss really liked my resume, and I was called for an interview. Hooray! But I needed to get ready. The interview's in 3 hours. I quickly put on a blouse, a self-made mini skirt, and Jimmy Choo shoes. By noon, I was already in the company building. But due to traffic jams, I had only 5 minutes left before the meeting. I rushed to the elevator. But hell, it was broken. In desperation, I even glanced at the stairs. But climbing to the 45th floor in shoes was not an option. A scowling man in an expensive suit who was standing nearby cursed and said that there was a freight elevator at the other end of the building and went there. I and Beauty with great hair followed him. There was another guy near the freight elevator. He smiled at me, so cute and positive. His face looked familiar. The doors opened. I hesitated for a second. I was scared to go alone with 3 men in this gloomy elevator. I looked at my watch. Only a minute left to get to the 45th floor. There was no choice. Inside, the cabin didn't look like much, and the elevator was clearly rarely used. We were going awfully slow, and I couldn't help but give every stranger in the elevator a nickname. The one who brought us here, very confused, was Nerd. I'd already given Beauty a nickname, and the one at the elevator was Pretty. It was probably the 100th time I looked at my watch. 12:05, that's it, I'm late. Now my career was over. I was so upset. Suddenly, the cabin swayed violently and I couldn't resist falling on top of Pretty. The elevator stopped. Beauty immediately started freaking out and pressed the button to call the dispatcher. But no one answered him. The elevator stood still. Nerd tried to calm us down, said that he already got stuck in this building, and we could be released soon. I took out my phone, but there was no connection. Nerd also checked and said that it looked like there was no signal in this damn elevator. Damn it, looked like we were trapped. 10 minutes passed, but the elevator didn't move. Nerd thoughtfully said that it was strange. It should not be so. The elevator might have been seriously damaged. I felt uneasy. Beauty started whining that he would sue these repairmen and everyone in this building. He slammed his fist into the speaker. That's nervous. I cried out in surprise, and Nerd suggested that maybe the connection in the elevator was damaged during braking. But it still needed to be fixed. We were waiting. I felt terrible around 3 men I didn't know. At one point, I thought I was suffocating. Suddenly, the elevator creaked loudly and jerked down. We flew several floors, and I already said goodbye to life. In the end, the cap braked and we fell to the floor. I hit the floor so hard and saw that I had broken the heel of my expensive shoes. Heck! Beauty stopped yelling, and now he was silently shaking with fear. Nerd was swearing loudly, and Pretty pressed himself against the wall and gripped the railing with his fingers. The elevator rocked and creaked softly. It seemed that one careless movement and it would collapse. Besides, I thought I smelled smoke. I got scared and started shaking. Pretty came up to me and put his hand on my shoulder. He started saying that everything was fine and we would manage. Finally, we heard some static and the dispatcher's voice. There is a fire in the building. I repeat, there's a fire in the building. Don't panic. Help is on the way. Immediately, the connection was cut off. I was afraid that we were lost and I started banging on the elevator door with all my might, but Nerd stopped me. We heard again from the speaker. We'll get you out. Don't try to open the elevator door yourself. Then the dispatcher went offline again. Beauty started yelling that the Mercedes he borrowed was parked right in front of the building, and that he had to save his car. Nerd shut him up and suggested that we follow the instructions if we want to wait for rescuers. We need to sit on the floor, so there's more chance of not suffocating. We all slid down, and sure enough, there was less of a burning smell. While Nerd was thinking about something in silence, Pretty tried to distract me. He asked me about everything, joked, but then his gaze lingered on my face. He stopped abruptly and swallowed. His eyes were blazing madly. That look sent a chill down my spine. And the Nerd abruptly blurted out that we needed to get ourselves out. We would probably run out of oxygen before the rescue team found us, especially if we continued to panic. We needed to open the elevator doors. Nerd quickly got to his feet and began to pull off the handrail to use it as a lever for the doors. The elevator shook again. We were going to crash. Pretty tried to stop him, but he didn't want to listen to anyone. Then he put his hand on his shoulder. But Nerd threw it off and said, "Don't touch me, okay?" He looked menacing and Pretty immediately retreated. Damn, I was so scared. I said that the fight would only make the oxygen run out faster and that we should work together. Although Pretty was on edge, he agreed. It did work out to tear off the handrail. We were doomed. I looked at Beauty. He was sweating and gasping for breath. He became hysterical that he was not ready to die. After all, he took the Mercedes on credit to impress the girl and admit his love to her. But he never got the chance. What's wrong with you guys? One almost got into a fight, the other won't shut up about his Mercedes. I suddenly felt bad. My head started to spin and I felt sick. Was I going to die here without getting help? Nerd asked me if I had something in my purse that I could hook a trapdoor in the ceiling. The smoke was getting worse. I barely forced myself to rummage in my bag and gave Nerd a nail file. What if this was the only chance of salvation? Nerd got his feet on the rail and started to pry the hatch with my nail file. And the lid gave way! Nerd ordered me to climb on his shoulders and into the hatch to look around. Well, no, there was no way I was going to sit on that dude's shoulder in my short skirt. Pretty told him to stay out of my way. Nerd gritted his teeth, then jumped up, clung to the hatch, and climbed in himself. Pretty asked if I was alright, and I thanked him for his help. At some point, our eyes met, and again I saw that predatory look. His face was getting closer. He clearly wanted to kiss me. What? I tried to push him away, but he leaned over my ear, breathed languidly, and began to whisper. He said he didn't recognize me right away, but he remembered. What did it mean? He tried to kiss me again. And this time I pushed him away so hard and turned to Beauty. But he was hurtled in the corner sobbing. Cowardly brute. Pretty didn't seem so cute anymore. His gaze became crazy. I suddenly remembered him. I looked him squarely in the eye and shouted, "Damn, so it's you who's that fat guy that I've been pushing away all the time. Yes, I didn't recognize you." He began to move slowly again. And then I looked into his eyes and shouted, "I remember you. You're Jack. You were disgusting to me, and you haven't changed at all." My words seemed to throw him into shock. He froze and stared at one point without moving. Looks like I've got him restrained. At that moment, I heard Nerd from the hatch. He said that there was an exit upstairs, but someone needed to help him get to it. I didn't care about the short skirt just to get out of there. I asked Nerd to give me a hand, and when he held it out, I started climbing up on the roof. The steel ropes creaked dangerously as I climbed through the open hatch. I saw that one of them was almost torn off. On the roof, I looked around. The door to the floor was high up. Nerd said I should climb up the steel ledges and call for help. But why me? He threatened me and said that he would lug me up there if I didn't get in. Coward! He was just afraid to fall out of there. I balked and said I wouldn't climb. Nerd was furious and had swung at me. When suddenly we heard dispatcher's voice. After 5 seconds, the elevator starts to descend. The countdown started. I wanted to go down to the cab, but Nerd pushed me roughly away and jumped down. The lid slammed shut and I couldn't open it. I begged him to open it, but Nerd just left me. The elevator jerked and began to climb up. Smoke suddenly poured out of the shaft. I almost fell off the floor, barely able to keep my balance. I thought I was going to fall. Suddenly, one of the cables snapped and the elevator stood still again. Oh no! The smoke was already everywhere, and I could barely breathe. I saw that they were trying to open the door upstairs. With the last of my strength, I pulled myself up the remaining rope and climbed up. Save me! I need help! The smoke was so thick and acrid. I tried not to pass out. My eyes were already closing and I was about to fall when I suddenly felt someone dragging me up. I was coming to my senses. And at some point, I got another call from the same firm and was asked to come for an interview. After everything that happened to me that day, I just had to get to their office. This time I put on sneakers and walked all 45 floors. I knocked on the door to my boss's office. And when I opened the door, Nerdo seemed as surprised as I was sitting at the table. I abruptly closed the door. I've had enough.